Good morning. This is Jason Dean at Film Fanatic. Thanks again to everyone that I know, personal friends, but then also many people I don't actually know, and coming out and checking out this page and supporting it. It's been really great. If you feel inclined, please like and subscribe to my page. I love that I've been getting some nice support. It's been really cool. Like the last 5 days or so, I've gotten about 14,000 hits on my new YouTube channel. I just recently changed the name from, it was originally under Jason Dean / Film Fanatic, and all the videos, the head of the page was under my own personal name, and then the videos themselves are under Film Fanatic, but I decided to change the name to where it's all Film Fanatic to maybe make it easier to find and to try to move the focus into just where it's really essentially just a movie channel. I do have other things on here. There's some music things. I do have Quantum videos. Mostly the videos on there for Quantum are from like this past summer. So, and I always talk about how music, and particularly Quantum, how it's all inspired by music and by film, by everything related and tied to films through the aesthetics and everything. So, but overall the focus is always going to be about films. And so, it's nice that I feel like I have a little bit of an audience now and it's growing. And with my schedule change now, I can do videos a lot quicker now, and I try to do a video just about every day. And the last few months I've bought a lot more movies. I've been, this summer was really great as far as gig wise. So I was able to put a little bit of money away, and also spend a little bit more money on all of these films. So all the films I tend to review on this channel are pretty much all films that I own. And so it's been great. I really appreciate people checking out, and also there's been more people, kind of engaged as far as commenting and liking the actual videos. So, I love having discussion about films with people. So, keep that stuff coming. It's great. And the more I do these videos, the more obviously I'm learning and trying to develop the skill set around how to, make these videos somewhat interesting and maybe approach things from a little bit of a different angle from, like, say, your typical, review videos. I always try to tie in music things, and talk about how these films kind of really resonate with me on a personal level, and as far as just and I talk about just their entertainment value. So I've been able to do more of these, obviously, and it's been a lot of fun. And moving forward, because I'm doing these more, it causes me to have more brainstorms as far as like new ideas. And the big thing I'm trying to focus on more in the future is doing the interview segments for Film Fanatic. I've been doing a few of those, and those have been a blast. And I noticed that they really seem to increase the traffic on the page. People seem to be interested in it, and I love doing it. That's my favorite part of what I do with this channel. I love the situation of exchanging ideas, in particular with people from, we have a commonality or a love for film, but there's also, an exchange of some from folks that have a different perspective or are bringing something new, and I really love that. So that's a blast. So today's show is all about 2022, The Batman, Matt Reeves film. I did a review for this film on my Facebook Live page when I saw this film. I think I did the video like a couple of days after I saw the movie. And now that I'm trying to change things up, now it's all, all the video things that I'm doing and that I will be doing in the future are going to be all exclusively just on this channel. I feel like the quality is a lot better, and I have a little bit more control over what I'm doing, and it seems to help. And I noticed that, obviously this whole thing with these videos has really helped. The more content I put up seems to increase traffic, and I also feel like it's the more I do it, the hopefully the better I get at it. And but then I'm also realizing things I want to always improve on, and so I did this show on the Batman, and they came out. I believe this film came out in the springtime of last year, and by far, and overall, it's my favorite Batman film. This film had a crazy history too, because it was shot right before the pandemic hit. Well, it was actually shot during the pandemic, and there were all these delays with the film. It was delayed for like 2 or 3 years because of the pandemic. And so it had this kind of black cloud around it for a long time. And I remember probably like two years ago, maybe 3 years ago, I they Matt Reeves, the director, writer director, had assembled from the footage that they had shot for the movie, had made a trailer, and I remember watching it. I remember actually watching it during the lockdown, and I was just I couldn't. I was blown away by it. I just thought it looked completely badass and kind of everything that I was hoping the film would be. It looked really gritty. It looked really dark, and it looked really original. And it looked like something. It felt like what Matt Reeves was trying to do was give you something very original and giving and I felt like he was giving the public a Batman film that no one else had, that's never really been done before. And that just really, you know, uh, increased you know, my curiosity and my desire to see this film by leaps and bounds. And I've talked about I'm a huge comic book fan. I've done the last series I did on this channel on Film Fanatic. I did a series on the uh, the Avenger films, and overall, at the end of the day, I'm probably more, when it comes to comic books or comic book movies, especially, I'm probably more of a Marvel guy. Batman is a DC comic book character, and but overall, I feel like there's a little bit more. Well, Marvel has more content, obviously. DC has quite a bit too, but I don't know, and it's just my opinion, but I feel overall Marvel has a better track record. They have, you know, as a franchise as a whole, like really all of Marvel, I feel like it's kind of one giant franchise as a whole. With like the last say 10 years that these films have been coming out, I feel like they're pretty cohesive, they're stronger, and there's still obviously there's certain films in it where they might have dropped the ball, but I think overall there there's a tremendous uh, body. There's definitely a tremendous body of work as far as the films go, and they've done an incredible job. DC, I feel, it has been pretty hit or miss a lot of times. There's been a lot of snafus, and a lot of times I feel like the train has gone off the tracks. Um, but that being said, like for as far as the whole superhero mythology, Batman has kind of always been my favorite character. I've always loved Batman. He's always been. I've always loved the kind of the dark aesthetic. I love that he works in the shadows. I love the detective aspect of it. I love that he's also a very complicated character. I've always loved that he always kind of totes this line. I love that he's a vigilante, and his character always goes to a place of where there's a lot of darkness, and you always feel like he's going to cross that line to where he could easily become a criminal. Uh, but then he does have this a degree of a moral compass of where he's aware of his disposition, but then he kind of brings it back. But he always has this thing of where he, in order to be successful, he he totes that line of where it could go either way at times, and and also the fact that he is essentially a vigilante and he takes things, he works outside of the system completely, and he's kind of an anti-hero to a degree. I love that he does work in the shadows that way. Um, and I always feel like he has that, he's obviously a superhero, but he has the qualities of when he's pushing those boundaries. I've had this discussion with other people about it. It's interesting. The hero versus, like, say, the anti-hero, and usually the anti-hero. Perfect example of that is someone like, which is another movie of mine that I just absolutely love, and I'll eventually do a review. John Carpenter's Escape from New York. Kurt Russell, who plays Snake Plissken, his character, I feel like, is the epitome of the anti-hero. He has all these attributes, and to a degree he's built up as like the hero figure of the film, but he's really all about trying to survive and get what he can out of the situation, and he doesn't really care about any idea of like a just cause. He doesn't do anything for anyone else. He does everything for himself, and he does questionable things in the pursuit of his own self-preservation. And he doesn't believe in carrying any kind of flag or having any um, ties to any kind of movement. So he's like an anti-hero. And with Batman, he's obviously a hero. He does, especially in this film, you see where he eventually his own like moral compass grows to the point of where he does move to a point of where he feels what he's trying to do for Gotham City is he's justifying what he does for like the greater good, the safety of the community of Gotham. But I feel like, so he is a hero, but I feel because he's tied to that sense of like a bigger picture, and he is fighting for a cause more or less. But at the same time, I feel he's got shadows and he's got shades of the anti-hero, because especially early on in his crime fighting career, he, the reason I say the reason I think that is because Batman works completely out of the system. He's essentially a vigilante. He's coming from an incredibly dark place. He saw his parents get murdered at a young age, which completely emotionally traumatized him, obviously, for the rest of his life. So he's kind of a disturbed individual, and he's a vigilante, and he does work outside of the system. He has his own kind of moral, to a degree, moral code and a set of ethics. But he also totes that line to where he does things by his own terms, and he has questionable methods as to how far he'll go. And I feel like with Batman, there's always this cool tension with his character because he's a hero, but then he has these attributes of where he could be a villain, and also he has these shades of being the anti-hero, where in order to get the outcome that he's looking for, he'll push those boundaries so far to where you feel he could go either way, and almost, and be that criminal or be that person, or who is completely outside of the system and has no moral compass. So he's got this. Batman has this tension around him where he pushes the boundaries as far as he can, and you always think there's always these areas of where he'll go where you think he could easily be the criminal, and he's not really thinking of the greater good. He's willing to do whatever it takes. So I feel like in that regard, to a degree, he has like the shade of the anti-hero. So I feel like he's a really unique character in the whole kind of comic book mythology. And going back to Batman, there's so many great films in the whole kind of canon of Batman. There's a lot. There's so many. I mean, probably the greatest collection of films, and probably the most well known, are the films that Christopher Nolan directed. Uh, Batman Begins, Dark Knight, and then Dark Knight Rises. And Christopher Nolan directed those that trilogy, and that went on to become probably overall probably the most successful franchise. And I've had discussions, like I've talked to my great friend Sean Russell, and he was a guest on the show way back when, and he kind of refers to the Dark Knight as being like the Citizen Kane of Batman movies. And in a lot of ways, it's true. I mean, and I think particularly that one, and obviously it starred Heath Ledger as the Joker. Just amazing. Just pure lightning on the screen. That film I feel is a masterpiece, and Batman Begins I think is just an incredible movie, like from top to bottom. But there's something about The Dark Knight that I just feel like it's even elevated even more, and it's a masterpiece. And I also I'm a huge fan of the Tim Burton films. I think his particularly his first one, Batman with Michael Keaton. I just think that's an amazing film. It's a great adaptation of the original, like, Bob Kane creation, who created Batman. Just amazing. And that movie I think is a masterpiece too. And as a kid I grew up watching the Adam West comic book, series adaptation, the live action one, and it's completely silly and goofy and just over the top and ridiculous, but I think it's still awesome and great. I tend to like my favorite kind of incarnation of Batman is the Frank Miller adaptation, the Dark Knight, where Batman is more. It's much more of a darker character, and it focuses a lot more on the detective aspect, where he's kind of known first and foremost as the world's greatest detective. That's my favorite kind of incarnation of him, and the setting and the way Gotham City is portrayed as being this really dark and violent and seedy place. But that being said, I love the original series, that with Adam West. Super silly and goofy, but it was great, and that was a regular thing, a regular staple of my diet as a kid. I mean, I used to watch that show religiously. That was probably how I discovered Batman, and then eventually I got into reading the comic books. But it was probably through that show from the 60s that was how I discovered it. And the other movie I actually really, really like a lot, and a lot of people hate it, but is Batman and Robin, the one that came out with George Clooney quite a few years ago, and Chris O'Donnell as Robin, and also Arnold Schwarzenegger as Mr. Freeze. And the reason I love that movie so much, and I want to do a review on that movie, but the reason I love that movie so much is it reminds me so much of the television show, and it's so over the top, like it's so the other extreme and it reminds me very much of the original TV show from the 60s. But so it has that whole aesthetic, and I love the colors. I love that it pops. Everything just pops off the screen. It's super silly and ridiculous and campy, and it's a fun movie. And I actually really love that movie. I remember when I first saw it, because I was so into Tim Burton at the time. I really loved his films, and I was really obsessed with Michael Keaton as Batman, and how dark and brooding that movie is. And I've always loved, when I got into comic books, I always gravitated towards the Frank Miller aspect of Batman. I did not like that movie when it came out. I kind of hated it. I kind of thought it was a piece of garbage. But then, I don't know, it was years later I saw it. I bought it actually on DVD about 3 or 4 years ago, and I had seen it a bunch of times, over the years, and I always thought it was terrible. And then I bought a copy of it on Blu-ray, or actually on DVD at Goodwill for like $1 or something, and I watched it, and I've seen it quite a few times since then. I found myself really enjoying this film. Like it's like total, it's a total popcorn movie, but it's so extreme, where it goes so much in the other direction that I thought it worked. And it's kind of, I almost feel like it's kind of a B movie, and because it's so silly and ridiculous and so campy, and it commits to being that kind of film that I think it really works and it's hilarious. And plus, Batman has nipples in it, so it's great. That's one of my favorites as far as the other films outside of Christopher Nolan and Tim Burton. Um, the other ones with Joel Schumacher, he directed two or three of those other films. Not a huge fan of those films, but I do like the Batman and Robin one. But getting back to the topic of today, my favorite, I got to see the Batman in the theater, and I was blown away by it. And I think in a couple of days or like that following week or when it came out actually on Blu-ray, I bought it immediately. And I've seen it a bunch of times since then. I'm gonna watch it again pretty soon. But I have to say that overall, it's my favorite Batman film. I think it. The thing that I love about it is that it really focuses on aspects of Batman that we've never seen before. I think it really portrays him as the world's greatest detective, like kind of how, kind of his core, and it really focuses on the darker aspects of him as far as being a vigilante and really, his sense of isolation, especially early on in his, you know, origins of being Batman, and I feel like it really just Matt Reeves did an incredible job, and I think he really gave you something, uh, and and put out a film that focusing on a story of the Batman that we've never seen before. The other thing that I love about it is that it plays out like a mystery. It's got all the great Batman tropes with like there's some like mind blowing action and just it's got all that stuff that you want to see in a Batman movie, but essentially it's a crime detective story. And it also is very much like a film noir. Every scene there's lots of rain. There's lots of rain. It harkens back to the whole classic film noir period, and every character in it has these questionable things about them where you like them, and then you also feel like they're also you know um, they could be criminals also. And we tying back again to the whole notion of the antihero, which the whole kind of concept of the antihero came out of the whole film noir um, kind of world, and I love that it has that very much has that universe, or it comes out of that universe, and it reminds me a lot. His film really reminds me a lot of Matt Reeves, the way he filmed the movie and the way kind of the aesthetics are. It reminds me very much of like David Fincher, even though it's his own thing, because it just has qualities of. It reminds me of two of his films in particular, Seven, which I think is a masterpiece, and also Zodiac. But yet, I think Matt Reeves did something totally new and different with that. But essentially, like it plays out like a detective story. Like both of those films, I feel like I love David Fincher. He's one of my favorite directors. But my two favorite films of his is Seven and Zodiac, and those movies are Zodiac. Well, I should say Seven has obviously has aspects of horror, but it plays out like a film noir, and it's a detective story first and foremost. And the same thing with Zodiac, and it just has this really dark and kind of creepy aesthetic behind it. And I feel like this film, The Batman, has that same kind of concept behind it. And plus the cast, I feel like I'm a huge Robert Pattinson fan. And it was funny because when I first discovered him, like most people did, it was through the Twilight series, and I thought he was okay in those films. I'm not a fan of those films, and I realized they served their purpose. They're essentially like vampire stories made for children, but they're not terrible. I feel like some people maybe crap on them a little bit too much, but they're not. I don't think very great. They're not very good films, but Robert Pattinson was known. That's what put him on the map, and I never really thought of him after seeing those films that well maybe he like that he's like say a legitimate actor or has like serious acting chops or could do other things outside of these essentially what they these kids movies. But I remember after he was in those films, he didn't do any films for a little while, and then the first movie I saw him in, aside from the Twilight movies, was Cosmopolis, which was a David Cronenberg film, and I was kind of blown away. I was like, "This is Robert Pattinson!" Like I couldn't believe because he plays this really gritty, kind of twisted character, and in this film, and he's basically in every scene, and I was just kind of blown away by wow, like this guy is a pretty serious actor. And I'd seen him in a couple other movies since then, since that movie, and I was like, wow, he's like got some serious chops and these incredible. He has these incredible abilities as an actor, and I never thought he was that kind of caliber of an actor. And then when The Lighthouse came out, Robert Eggers' movie with Willem Dafoe, which I love that movie so much, and Robert Eggers is one of my favorite directors. When I saw that film, and Robert Pattinson was in that, I was completely blown away by his performance in that. And I was like, no, I felt like right away after seeing that film, I'm like, he's like kind of the Marlon Brando of his generation. He can do anything. I think he's one of the greatest. I think he's one of the greatest working actors around. And I think he's easily one of the best in his generation. And I'm like, this guy could do anything. So when I heard that he was cast as Batman, I was like, wow, like this could be wild. Like where could this go? Because I saw that he has all of these, different sides to his acting personality. And I'm a real big Matt Reeves fan too. I think he's a really tremendous I think he's a tremendous director. And getting back to the cast of the Batman, Robert Pattinson, as the Batman, Zoe Kravitz, and I can't forget Paul Dano as the Riddler, and Colin Farrell, and Jeffrey Wright, and Andy Serkis. Paul Dano in this film was just tremendous as the Riddler. I think the Riddler is easily one of the best characters in the whole Batman mythology, and this is easily the best version or screen adaptation of his character. I mean, he's legitimately this crazed serial killer. Paul Dano is just another actor who is just amazing and has such a diverse background. The first film I saw Paul Dano in was There Will Be Blood by Paul Anderson, directed by Paul Anderson, and starring Daniel Day-Lewis. And that film is just a masterpiece. And Paul Dano was in that film, who plays this preacher, and I had never seen him before. And that movie is just mind-blowing. And his performance in that is just unbelievable. And I've seen him in other films since then, Paul Dano, and he's another one that I just feel like he's like easily one of the best actors in the world right now. And he can do anything. He also, the other film I saw him in, which I can't remember the title of, but he did a Brian Wilson biopic of the Beach Boys. Paul Dano plays Brian Wilson in it. And that movie is amazing. It's it's easily one of the best, kind of biopic movies of a well-known musician. I mean, amazing. And he's the star, and he plays Brian Wilson, and just an amazing film. And then there was a film. Paul Dano's also a director. He did a film, came out last year. I wish I could remember the name of it. But he directed this film, and it's just really heavy duty kind of character study of a film. It's a melodrama, and it's Jake Gyllenhaal is the star in it. But it's a really great film. and he directed it, and I was just like, wow, like this guy has got so much stuff going on. So when I saw that he was cast as the Riddler, I was just like, holy mackerel, like this is just getting better and better. I mean, talk about trying to do something new and fresh. And the other great discovery was Zoe Kravitz, Lenny Kravitz's daughter. She plays Catwoman, and when I heard that they had announced that Catwoman was going to be, one of the villains or one of the central characters in the film, I was, you know, not really excited about it. I thought other than you know, um, Michelle Pfeiffer in the Tim Burton films or film, wasn't really ever happy with other portrayals, including Dark Knight Rises from Christopher Nolan. I was not a fan at all of the portrayal of Catwoman in those films. I thought it was pretty silly and just kind of ridiculous. But Zoe Kravitz was tremendous. I thought she's a great actor, and I thought she really brought the character of Catwoman to a new level. And Jeffrey Wright as Commissioner Gordon, or soon to be Commissioner Gordon, is just awesome in the film. Such an amazing actor. Yeah, another one that's just got such an amazing ability as an actor. And then Colin Farrell, easily for me, is his greatest role as the Penguin. I mean, you can't even recognize him. I mean, he truly transcends himself as an actor for the Penguin. I mean, just amazing. If I didn't know it was him in the movie, I wouldn't like. If I didn't see that he was in the movie, like with his name actually being listed, I wouldn't have thought it was him. And Matt Reeves, I think, is just an amazing director. Like he's in a rare. I think he's in a rare category because he does do films that are essentially kind of remakes or reimaginings of things, but he'll do them in a way that it's completely fresh and completely new. He did three remakes of the Planet of the Apes films, and essentially they're remakes of the classic movies from the '60s and '70s. But a few years back, he made his own trilogy, and I think those movies are just awesome. Like they're amazing, and they're totally original, totally unique. It's based on a classic kind of science fiction story, but he did something totally unique and put his own stamp on it. And amazing, amazing. Those are killer movies. Those are movies of his. Those Matt Reeves movies, the Planet of the Apes movies. Those are definitely three. I don't own any of them on Blu-ray, but I look forward to getting them at some point because they're just awesome, and they each get better. Particularly the third one is just an epic movie. He also did a bunch of other cool movies. He did a remake of Let the Right One In, which is one of the most amazing vampire movies ever made. I believe it's like a Norwegian foreign film, and he did Let Me In. He did an American version of that, and he did something totally different and unique with it. And it's an awesome movie. Like it's a really great movie, and I was blown away because in a lot of if that kind of thing was handled by a director that wasn't quite as skilled, it would have been just like a shell of a movie. But he is such a great filmmaker. The other movie that he did that I really, really loved that was like kind of his first movie was Cloverfield. And that's an intense movie. I remember that movie is such a unique film, and I believe it was his first film that he directed. And I remember going to see that in a theater, and it's such a disorient because it's basically a found footage movie about essentially like a monster invading the planet and destroying the planet, and it's told from the perspective of this footage that was found. So it's essentially this found footage movie, but it's super intense and it's so disorienting of a movie too, and it's an incredible movie. And so I've loved Matt Reeves for quite a few years, and I've been following his career, and I've seen all the movies he's been involved in, and he's just a really great, I think, visionary as a director, and he has a really unique thing about what he does because he's done about four kind of remakes or reimaginings of well-established films or franchises, but yet has done something totally unique and new with those films. just amazing. And so this Blu-ray collection is just I bought this at Bull Moose right when it came out on Blu-ray, and it's just so awesome. It's got a lot of great special features and all kinds of goodies. And the other thing too is it's a longer movie. It's close to 3 hours, but it's again, and it's a slow burn of a movie. It's got that slow pace, but it essentially is like has this real kind of literary feel because it plays out like a great crime detective story, and it's totally worth the time and investment. I just love this movie. For me, it's easily the best Batman film that there is in existence overall. And and that being said, there are so many great Batman films out there, and particularly Tim Burton and Christopher Nolan. But there's something special about this movie. I feel like it really gets to the core of who Batman is for me personally, as far as like and it focuses really heavily on his formative years, like him really being this uh, traumatized person, going after going through this really horrible situation, and then with him becoming a vigilante essentially, and him really pushing those boundaries, and then also really this film does such an amazing job, which I feel is the core of the movie, and the story is where it focuses on the detective aspects of the film, and I love that. It's got so much great suspense, and you really get the idea of the aftermath or fallout of things that happen to him as a character because of his methods. Super interesting. And so the one other thing I wanted to get to, which is totally related to this, and I read this last night. My great friend Nikki let me borrow this book, and this book is just an incredible book. It's called Dirty, 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 and it's basically of pigs, and it's by this writer Mike Edison, and it's called Dirty, 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 of Playboys, Pigs, and Penthouse Paupers, an American Tale of Sex and Wonder. Um, and this book is basically all about um, our culture and sex and what's deemed to be pornography, um, or what's deemed to be entertainment that can be that was at one time perceived to be that would lead people to deviant behavior. And I've been reading this book for a little while, and this is such an amazing book, and my friend Nikki recommended this to me, and it's it's so it's so in depth, and it's so interesting. I think Mike Edison's one of the best writers I've come across. But I was reading this last night, and there was something in here that just made me get out of bed. And usually I read at night before I go to sleep, but I was reading this before I was going to bed, and I read a couple of pages, and I was just like, oh my God, like this is just amazing. So it spurred on this idea of, okay, I should do a comic book movie review, and I wanted to do one on the Batman because I love this movie so much. So, and this totally pertained to it. And basically, it talks about, and I remember reading about this and hearing about it in the past. Um, but there was a book that came out in the, I think it's in the 40s, early 50s, called Seduction of the Innocent. And it was a book by Frederick Werham. And he was a psychiatrist at the time, and he wrote a book. He wrote this book, Seduction of the Innocent, and basically it was about where he attacked the comic books of the time for basically, he felt that comic books were leading people to kids to that comic books were corrupting the young minds of children and turning them into deviants and homosexuals and just all these completely insane things and various forms of delinquency. Um, and there's this one passage in this that was just unbelievable. Um, and the main targets of this book were popular crime horror comics of the day, and also things that were based in EC comics, and and that was most notably the classic series Tales from the Crypt. That was the biggest target of this book. Just wild, just wild. And especially he talked specifically about Batman, and he refers to Batman, especially men in the tights of the superhero. Batman stories are psychologically homosexual. Warham wrote, the Batman type of story may stimulate children to homosexual fantasies. Just unbelievable. Like this was a real uh, thing in the United States and a real school of thought. And this book really affected, almost caused the collapse of comic books. And I just thought that was that was one of the most amazing things I've read in so long. Um, that the image of Batman, a man in tights, can stimulate children to, wanting to be homosexuals. I just thought that was hilarious. So I just had to read that. Um, but amazing, amazing book. And so this is Jason Dean. So if you get a chance, definitely go see this movie. And I think this movie, the other thing that's so wonderful about it is you don't have to know anything about Batman. I think it's truly its own movie. It's like, to me, it's the definition of a true standalone film. You can watch this without even knowing or have heard of the Batman. I think it's just a great detective story at the end of the day. So this is Jason Dean. So thanks again, and we'll see you next time. And have a great day. Peace.